Hello everybody, I'm Josh, this is Alex, we are the target audience, and we both just saw Spider-Man No Way Home. We're going to be spoiler-free at the very beginning here in case you haven't seen it, but honestly, if you haven't seen the movie and you're watching this, the movie is out, I don't know what you're doing. But we will tell you before we get into spoilers. Alex, I'm just going to give you free reign to just go ahead, spoiler-free at first, whatever you want to jump into about this movie we both just saw.
Like you just said, spoiler-free, very hard in this movie, but I really wanted to talk about some filmmaking and acting standpoints. In a movie like this, where we're dealing with the multiverse, we're dealing with all these characters from previous movies, current movies, different universes, I think the relationships are super strong here. Like, I thought that'd be the weakest part. Like, okay, the dialogue, whatever, just like stuff with Ned, MJ, and Peter, but it's like all the dialogue was like super chewable and easily digestible. And at the end of Far From Home, Peter finally gets his, Spidey sense back, his Peter tingle. And in terms of a filmmaking aspect, like whenever he gets the tingle in this movie, like they do the Jaws effects, where like, zooms out as it moves in on him, like the background zooms out, and I thought that was awesome. It looked gorgeous. And yeah, in terms of acting, like all the emotional scenes with, especially Tom Holland, man, that guy is a star. Just looking at him throughout this growth of this character. At first, like, oh yeah, he's good, he's pretty good, but like his eyes, man, they tell a story like no other. Like I was during his emotional scenes, I'm like, fuck, man. I mean, how about you? What do you got so far?
Yeah, so agree with you on most fronts there. The direction and cinematography, I thought were just like so much better than the first two Spider-Man movies and really like most of the MCU. One of the biggest knocks against those first two Spider-Man MCU films was that it was very like flatly directed, almost like a comedy. Not much camera work. Far From Home had some cool little sequences, but this movie is just like on another level, and it's obviously still John Watts directing. I don't know if the cinematographer is the same, but my goodness, that was one of my favorite parts technically. And then with the act, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. It felt both new, like such improvement, but also with keeping with the old, with the characters. They made some of the older ones so goofy, like the gym teacher, the gym teacher, which is a comedian, Hannibal Buress.
Yeah.
And the two other dudes, like stuff with them, like still with this whole new scenario of everyone knowing that Peter's Spider-Man, like they made the dynamic work. So with one of the biggest movies ever, they still had a little bit of that, home, as they like to say. That home, like it still feels like it's still like in that little niche world of Tom Holland's Peter.
Yeah, and
but also being the biggest movie possibly.
Yeah, maybe that's why it felt like on such another level, is because it would show you those examples, especially early on in the movie, of still being in that homecoming world and the Far From Home world. But Homecoming is really what set it up. I actually just rewatched Homecoming this week, so like having that set up, and then it's like now all of this, and it's like just completely insane. So really enjoyed it. Just I thought the direction and everything was a step above. And then also I agree with you for sure on the acting. Not much more there to add. I'll just say literally everyone in the movie knocked out of the park. Of the characters that aren't spoilers because they've been confirmed, I will say standouts to me were Tom Holland, like you said, but also Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn, Green Goblin. Like, my God, you could tell he really got into it again. He was not here just to like collect a paycheck. He loved playing the character, and you could see that throughout the film. And I loved how much time he got, how much time all those villains got, and there was purpose to him being there. There was purpose, and you could see it in his acting that he really was kind of bought in, and that was really awesome to see.
Yeah, every villain there wasn't just there for we're here to fight. Like, everyone had their own sort of deal going on. Like, for a movie with as many villains as it had, like, it didn't feel too convoluted, too full. It felt like everyone had something going on, which was, to fit that in 2.5 hours, which, chef's kiss, congratulations, you did it. But yeah, knowing Willem Dafoe and just knowing, I know you know that I know that I'm a big fan of his work, and like, you give that guy a script, doesn't matter, he could say the same word 50 times over, he'll somehow tell a story saying the same word 50 times. So, no surprise. And I'm glad they didn't just, like, have him be a small part. Because he had a big part in this movie. And he's great. He's
Yeah.
great.
And
But I feel like we're about to break loose here.
yeah, I was just gonna say really quick. As far as positives, emotional beats worked really well for me. The comedy beats didn't always land. They don't, and no MCU movie do they 100% land, but a lot of them did for me. I thought it was a funny movie as well. And the overall story of how they told what they wanted to tell. It was this big movie that included this whole franchise and IP from this, the past 21 years, but also focused on Tom Holland's Peter Parker and was a true story and stepping stone for him. Great that they were able to pull both of those off. I have negatives, but I'll get into that in the spoilers. Really, all I'll say is probably, it's so hard to say this right after it came out, but probably my favorite MCU Spider-Man movie. That's hard to say right off the bat, but I'd really, I just feel like it is after watching it. It's hard to say that it isn't the best one. And overall, in terms of Spider-Man movies, it might not be everyone's favorite, favorite, because I know a lot of people have attachments, but it's just got to be up there. I can't imagine anyone who likes Spider-Man movies not liking this one. I would be very shocked if that was the case.
It's a great movie for Spider-Man fans. It's like it felt like it was made for the target audience here. Hey,
made for us.
Hopefully, yeah,
for
made
you
for
too.
us. But yeah, really quick before we jump into spoilers. The comedy landed with me. I was laughing my balls off the entire time, and it wasn't to the point where it was Guardians of the Galaxy 2, where I'm like, enough jokes, please. The comedy worked for me. Maybe not everyone, but it's like I had a good time. So if I'm ready, you're ready.
All right, we are officially going to jump into spoilers. So if for however reason you haven't seen No Way Home and you haven't been spoiled or whatever the case is, go see it before you watch the rest of this. Usually I would say if you don't care, you can stick around. But in this case, honestly, I would rather you not stick around if you haven't seen it. Go see the movie. And yeah, let's jump into it. So, I think maybe it might be easy if we go in timeline of the movie, unless you want to do it a different way. I don't know how to go about it.
Yes, I will go in timeline of the movie, but first I want to say really quick, pizza time! Woo! Toby! That's my spoiler for the spoilers. But yeah, let's go from the beginning. I really liked how this movie opened up right where we left off. No bullshit. And how in the modern world of social media and how fast word travels, from when he says what the fuck and then straight to right after that where everyone's swarming him at his apartment. And Tom Holland he's looking pretty jacked lately. Good for him when they but I thought that opening was exactly what it needed to be. I had a feeling it was going to be what the trailer was, the early part of the trailers where everyone figures out, which I'm fine with. I thought the pacing with that was pretty good, especially knowing what's to come now. It's okay. It felt pretty solid. And every time I'm like, oh no, we're almost near the end. But then it wasn't. But we'll get to that. How about you?
Yeah, beginning of the movie, literally they're replaying the mid-credit scene from Far From Home's audio over the Marvel opening, jumping literally right in. I did enjoy that, and it was a really cool opening sequence when he takes MJ up to the top of that bridge and he just sees the helicopters and everybody looking at him, and the whole opening 10-15 minutes of the movie, it really dug in on the perspective of what it's like if everyone finds out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And also love there was a long continuous take when he gets to his apartment with Aunt May and Happy, where the camera just follows him around the whole apartment as he's trying to close all the windows and everything. Excellent camera work there. And really enjoyed the opening scene, which led into there was a lot that happened there, but the one that sticks out in my mind is Daredevil, Charlie Cox's Daredevil, showing up at Peter Parker's apartment to be his lawyer, or at least give him legal advice.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Really quick to backtrack on what you said. I remember one of my favorite scenes from Homecoming is the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man scene, where he's literally got nothing to do. No one knows his name. He's helping old ladies cross the street, giving them directions, catching a guy trying to open into his own car, and no one even knows who he is. And then all of a sudden, it's the exact opposite, where everyone knows who he is, where he lives. So I thought that parallel and that flip side was great. But yeah, that was I really appreciated that. The long take of closing all the windows and Happy being there again, and him and Aunt May broke up. I like how they're still continuing that. And the entire time I felt urgency, everyone knows, guys. It's just tell them. Then the lawyer scene, and then I like the guy who played the FBI agent, how he was playing all three of them. and he was only in that one scene, but I really liked how he played Ned for the full. He was really trying to get the MJ and Aunt May lawyered up, which I thought was nice. And then once again, what I said in the spoiler-free section when they were talking about how it's really about the relationships between these three characters, I really liked how it wasn't just, oh, everyone knows I'm Spider-Man, that's it. You know, now I got to change it because whatever. It's because they couldn't get into college. I'm like, oh, yes, that's so good. I like that. It's like it's not just everyone knows. It's like they added another reason of depth. Because my biggest worry about this movie was like Ned and MJ are just going to be like lowest to the low side characters in this, but no, like
they were not.
Everyone had stakes and like was important.
And I would say that they had bigger roles in this than the other two films. The Spider-Man films, they had bigger roles with all these characters. And I would say the only characters, as far as that goes, that were sacrificed were like the minor characters from like Homecoming and Far From Home. You know, the Flash Thompsons and the Betty. You know, the people from school. They had like their one or two scenes, but they weren't really a part of the story. It was nice to still see them like get those nods, though.
I thought the same. I'm like, I understand. It's like same thing with the gym teacher and the regular teachers. It's like you'll be in this, but you have to understand what this movie is.
Yeah, I'm sure they had to tell them.
It's like, listen, like you can meet with Toby backstage, but like this is big. You can have your one scene, but.
Yeah, and the college thing I thought was incredibly smart too, because I was afraid that it was going to jump right into, oh, everyone knows Spider-Man's Peter Parker, so now all these villains are going to come hurt his family. Like, it wasn't even that serious, you know, it was just his friends can't get into college because they hung out with him. You know, it still kept it on that kind of lower level. You know, eventually, if this whole multiverse thing didn't happen, would villains have come out and tried to attack his family because they know who he is? Probably, but I'm glad it didn't even get to that level. It stayed more so on the really human relationship level, like you said. And then as far as, I don't want to jump too far ahead too quickly, so tell me, you know, but as far as the Daredevil scene, when he shows up, in my theater, so I had a pretty good theater. It wasn't quite Endgame level, but there were some good reactions in my theater. It was sold out. And the Daredevil reveal was one of the actual biggest reactions in my theater. Like, near standing ovation.
That was the first reaction for my theater. Like, you know how some people, like Infinity War and Endgame, people were cheering during like the opening montage. Like, it was completely silent until Daredevil showed up, and like that just like. I love that. I love that. Good for Charlie Cox. And now, spoiler, Hawkeye. You've probably already seen it at this point, but with Kingpin and like I don't know, man. Like how many other people? Like it's getting kind of exciting out there.
Yeah.
And also, great scene with back to that scene where he catches the brick. It made me laugh so hard. It's like, how'd you do that? I'm a good lawyer.
Yeah, that was a great scene, and it was unfortunate. You definitely called it, that he had that one scene, and that was it. But there's so much in this movie. It's a Spider-Man movie. It is what it is. It was literally like he was there to be like confirmation of, yes, I exist in this universe, and then leave.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been weird. I mean, we'll get to it later, but if it was the three guys and then Daredevil, like it wouldn't fit. But then we get back into the trailer story where, you know, they don't get accepted in MIT. Oh no!
Or any of the colleges.
Any of them, yeah. Because I remember people would apply to college, they'd apply to a bunch of them, and they'd get accepted to some, not accepted to some, but they got accepted to none. And then MJ works at a coffee shop, sees the Halloween decorations, and even though we knew what it was watching the trailer, Tom Holland's facial acting of like subtly realizing what he has to do, like slowly telling the story with his face, like of him coming up with the idea, which I thought was great. And then Doctor Strange is introduced in Wong, and we find out Wong is now the Sorcerer Supreme, which I thought was awesome because he wasn't blipped. But
so this is the one moment where I went to the bathroom during the movie. So I'll admit that
you did. So you did go to the bathroom. Okay.
So I don't know if we've talked about it actually on the channel before. I notoriously always have to go to as soon as like the trailers end, you know, I suddenly have to go pee every single time. So I always try to pick the best part in the first act to go. In this film, when he saw the decorations and then he started walking into Doctor Strange's building, I was like, okay, I've seen almost this whole scene in the trailer. I think it'll be okay to go pee real quick. I got back right before Wong was leaving, but I did miss that part. So that's a little part I did miss about him being the Sorcerer Supreme. So that is pretty cool.
Yeah, it was like a little throwaway comment, like I'm not the Sorcerer Supreme. Wong is because this happened because I was blipped or whatever, and like it's all snowy in there because like they opened up one of their sling rings and somewhere it was snowy and it all blew in. So that's the reason behind. That's the reason behind that. But then, like the trailer goes, they go into the spell and Peter's like, "Oh no, people will forget." Blah 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 blah. And I really liked how after it, I thought everything was okay. Because Strange traps the spell, and I'm like, for a second, I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I bought it. Like, okay, maybe that trailer was just like a fake out type thing. Like, we're not going to know what really happens. And then Peter discovers, through Flash, who writes a book.
Yeah, it pretends to be his friend.
Yeah. Out of Flash got accepted to MIT, of course, but not the other three. And then Flash says, "Oh, hey, she's going to the airport, so you better go get her." And there's traffic on the highway, and then if you watch the trailer, you're like, "Oh, we're getting into it. We're getting into it."
Yeah, and to go back real quick on the Doctor Strange thing before we move on from that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, too, that it felt a little, when we were watching the trailer, it felt really off in the trailer to me. Like, I'm like, why would Doctor Strange do this spell? Like, it's so easily, like, he messes it up. It seems just very kind of like weird and convenient. In the movie, I think it plays a little bit better. I still think it's a little bit plot convenient that he would so easily accept to do that. And even during the spell, when he's like, Peter's messing with it, and he's like, all right, whatever. And I get Doctor Strange is sometimes careless and arrogant, but like with that, a universe-breaking spell for him to just, to just not be like, hey, you need to like shut up and go over there, was a little bit like, all right, whatever. But I do think it was presented better in the actual movie after he contains the spell, and then he gets mad at Tom Holland for not even calling the college. He's like, you didn't even call the college before you came to see me. That kind of solidified a little bit more for me. And then
that was funny, yeah.
And then we get to the highway scene where obviously we have seen in the trailers of Doc Ock's first appearance. What'd you think of that?
I'll get to that in a second, but I want to backtrack a little bit. And I liked how like Wong was like, oh yeah, you cast that spell, you made me forget that party, whatever. It's not a big deal. Like Wong made it seem like a big deal, and for Strange to just cast that spell, that made it seem like kind of like, But the fact that the spell like wasn't even a big deal until he started fucking with it and the ramifications, because they used it to like forget a party night, but Peter's trying to forget like the biggest event in his life, so that makes sense. The bridge scene was. I'm glad how long it was. The action and the fight choreography was incredible. I thought it was great. And the nanotech, like, going onto Doc Ock's arms, I'm like, oh, shit. But it wasn't to his benefit. That's how he got locked up. And then we get the Green Goblin reveal. And then, I love this. Whew, from our perspective, like, all of a sudden, he's back in the basement. I thought that was great. Yeah. I love that whole scene, and we get that slight confirmation, you're not Peter Parker. That first tease, which was great, and I'm glad Doc Ock had all that dialogue and character development and seeing all the villains interact. But we'll get to the rest of the villains, but yeah, big fan of the bridge scene.
Yeah, bridge scene was really cool. A lot of it was in the trailer, obviously, but it was really cool seeing it. And also the fact that he saves the college admissions woman who's then like, oh, I'll talk to the college. And that ends up, in the big scheme of things, being irrelevant, but it was nice that they kind of wrapped up that storyline a little bit, and we're like, okay, now let's move on to this big one. And then as far as Doc Ock, after that scene when they go into Doctor Strange's basement and Doc Ock is locked up in like the chamber thing, one of the biggest questions I had going into this movie is, why is Doc Ock still a villain, right? Like, I understand Green Goblin dies while he's a villain, Electro dies while he's a villain, but like the two that stuck out to me were like Sandman, or I guess the Lizard even too. Sandman, the Lizard, and Doc Ock all had this kind of like face turn moment before they die in their movies. So it's kind of like, why are they still villains? So the fact that they kind of retcon that into they come into this universe right before like their death, I thought that was the perfect kind of like way to right away why they would still not have gone through that face turn.
Yes, they weren't exactly clear on when they got pulled through, if I'm correct.
It was, just kind of like in that final battle of their movie at some point.
Yeah, and because in the trailer it's like, oh, they all die fighting Spider-Man, which isn't true. It's like I forget what he says. It's like some of them do, but it's like they have to go back and meet their fate. It's when Peter learns that some of them did, he's like, oh no, we can do something about this. And like I think that's what makes Tom's Peter like one of the strongest ones. For him, like not being arrogant, but being like reckless enough to believe good in all others, even though one guy's made of sand.
Mm-hmm.
One guy. It sucks. Was Lizard was already caught, wasn't he?
Yeah, Doctor Strange was basically just like, I found this guy in the sewer.
Yeah. So after that introduction, really, what I really like, I saw the trailer. I'm like, oh, there's so many suits, all these new suits. I'm like, of course, more suits. Like it's always what's the deal with all these suits, especially with the Spider-Man video game suits. But like the one suit is just the regular one, inside out. I'm like, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
I love that. Like it's no reason. It's just inside out. And then the one way later on is just a nanotech coming back to it, and it made that cool spider symbol. I'm like, fuck yeah. Why is everything like, oh, new movie, gotta have four more suits?
Yeah.
So
I do think he turned it inside out because I had the green paint all over it, and he couldn't wash it off. Yeah.
Someone threw like a green like paint bomb at him, which I thought was great. Then we get into how we're introduced to Electro, and I liked how he was blue. He was actually blue because that was the biggest question. I'm like, okay, he looks a lot better now, but why?
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of the new electrical systems that are going on, and it just changed him. And Sandman is introduced. That actually saves Peter because Sandman was a good guy at the end of his arc, which I thought was nice. Obviously they couldn't bring back the original actor because he was Sand 95% of his appearance, and if you've seen Spider-Man 3, you've known that that's a direct rip from Spider-Man 3, just in reverse of him, his hand forming back, because in the movie it falls apart. It's the exact same look.
Yeah.
I don't know why they couldn't get him, or it might have even been the same for Lizard, because his actual face was only in there like for 2 seconds, but
yeah,
whatever.
I would be pretty confident that the Lizard was the actor based on the shots they had of him once he turned back into a human. He looked older, but with the Sandman, I thought I was pretty sure it was his voice the whole time, but then when he turned back, and I was like, yeah, that's like old footage, definitely. So that if they found someone who just sounds like him, good job, because that really sounded like him.
I didn't. As soon as I heard the voice, I'm like, something's not right.
You knew right away?
I knew right away. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it got me. So
you can't get everybody. No, I'm not doing it. But they still told his story well, and all these villains, like this movie was like not what I expected at this point. Like when we get into that second act, I'm like, just like Peter like freeing all the villains. Locking Doctor Strange in the mirror universe. That little fight was so fun, I think.
Oh yeah, let's make that its own talking point. But first, I want the Electro thing. Don't have much more to add when it comes to actual Electro in that scene. It was fine. It was good. But the Sandman's first appearance, probably my favorite first appearance of the villains because of how goofy and cheesy it was. Like everyone has like their own little scene. Like I guess the Lizard kind of gets screwed out of it, but he's just already there. But then Sandman, he's fighting Electro, and Sandman just appears out of the ground. And he just goes, "Peter, remember me?" And it's just like so ridiculous. It's like, why are you here? I love that, and I love that he was actually trying to be a good guy, like at first, until he realizes it's not Tobey Maguire's Peter, and he's like, "You're not Peter," and then that makes him not trust him anymore. So he actually did kind of was at first trying to be good because he helped him fight Electro. But yeah, that was my favorite I laughed out loud when that happened. I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, we didn't go into that in our second trailer reaction, trailer number 2 reaction of why Sandman was on the other side. I was just excited to see him. I was so overblown, but now I'm thinking about it, and I'm glad they explained that because, second act, like similar to Endgame, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like all these villains and Tom Holland just hanging out and like trying to fix themselves, and like some are into it, some are not, and then we're getting some seeds planted, with Electro, like saying, "Oh, I don't like this," and he sees the arc reactor. It's like, "Oh, what's that?" And that middle part's a little fuzzy for me right now.
Yeah,
because
I would say it's
Go
the
on.
weakest. I would say it's the weakest. I'm not saying it's bad, but the weakest part of the movie to me was once they got all the villains there, and then he meets Norman Osborn, who smashes his suit. Which tiny little bit salty that we got literally one shot of him in the original suit, which was already in the trailer. But I understand that it is what it is. But he finds him. He's like good for the moment, and he brings him back. Once they were all there, and it's like, oh, now let's go to Happy's apartment. It's like, okay, I was just like, let's get, it dragged just a little bit there for me, but look, it's a 2.5 hour movie, and you literally had to have that to set up where it went, so it made sense.
Yeah. At that point, I'm getting scared. I'm like, what if Toby and Andrew aren't in this? Like, I don't, because it felt a little long. I'm like, I know this movie's 2.5 hours, but like, I was starting to get worried, like, what's gonna happen? But we have, after all this, Peter's trying to help them all out. Good guy Peter, with Ned and MJ trying to figure out cures to help them all. Eventually, Peter has his Jaws spider sense moment. And what I really liked about this, we didn't know who it was for. Because right before this, he cured Doc Ock's broken chip.
Mm-hmm.
That was, causing him to be an angry bastard. And then... so he's like back to normal, how he was before the chip broke, which I'm like, oh, cool. And then like there's a lot of development with Willem Dafoe, which I really liked. It's like all of a sudden, Oscorp doesn't exist here. All this, like, he's got nothing, and he's like in like homeless clothes, which purple and green, awesome. And like he's hanging out with Aunt May, and you can see in the background like Aunt May's talking to Peter, like really need to help him, and like Doc Ock's like stealing stuff off the table.
Norman Osborn, yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. He's like stealing muffins off the table. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
And then we get the reveal that I'm glad they really went into this the double. Oh, what's it called? Dual identity between Green Goblin and Norman.
Yeah, they went really hard into that. They leaned into it more than even like Spider-Man 1 kind of, because Spider-Man 1, yeah, Spider-Man 1 makes it clear when he has the scenes where he's talking to himself in the mirror, but it was almost like a split personality in this movie to that extent. I don't know if that's more comic accurate, I don't know, but I really liked that. Before we miss it, because we brought it up before and then we kind of shelved it, but we're getting past it now, the Doctor Strange Spider-Man fight. One of my favorite parts of the movie. It was awesome, and the fact that they straight up basically had Spider-Man win the fight against Doctor Strange, who's like one of the most OP characters so far in the MCU, was awesome, but like nuts to see.
In his arena, like with the Mirror Universe, he even says like, I'm in charge here. Mm-hmm. And then through math, wait, it's just geometry. I know geometry, which leading back to the whole MIT thing I thought was hilarious, setting up stuff earlier to have it pay off later. Nice little storytelling tricks that I liked. But yeah, that fight was gorgeous, and watching the trailer, I didn't realize it would be a fight, and then watching it, it's this huge fight. And one little scene when Doctor Strange does his famous soul push thing, and then Peter's out, and then even though Peter's out, not in control of his body, Strange tries to grab the box again. That sends everyone back to their universe. But like Peter's unconscious body keeps moving it around. Do you think that's like because his body was bit by the spider, that's just his unconscious?
Yeah, I took it as a spider thing. Like, because spiders can move faster or whatever. That's how I took it, because even Peter outside of his body wasn't doing it. So I think it was like just a subconscious level, movement, which is really cool.
Yeah, the whole being able to fight spider sense thing, that totally makes sense. Yep. Okay, so where did we leave off?
So after the fight, Peter basically beats him and traps him in the mirror realm, and even says after he gets out when he's talking to Ned and MJ, and he's like, "All right, he's stuck there. I don't know how long." Like, he just has no like care for the fact you just left him in there.
And the fact that he's a kid, he's like, "I just fought Doctor Strange. Oh my god!"
And he's like, "And I won." And then after that is when they, all the villains are kind of like, "Oh wow, he could have just let us all die, but he didn't." So at least some of them seem like they're gonna, go along with them, and that's when they go back to Happy's apartment. And right away, this is where the movie felt a little bit. Again, what comes directly after this is like really good, but this is where I felt like, oh, it's a very cheap kind of like, where's Dr. Connors? Oh, he stayed in the van. Why? You know what I mean? Like, it was just like very like kind of, I don't even want to say messy, but it was just kind of like, we have to have this scene to move the plot forward.
it never explained why he was in there. But I know we went through all this already, but we find out that Willem Dafoe is basically the big bad here.
Mm-hmm.
And holy fuck, they made him strong. He was so fucking strong. And like him and Peter have this fight, and like Peter was famous, Tom Holland, Peter was famous for not throwing a single punch in Homecoming, not one. And to see him now, yeah, like he didn't throw a single punch in that movie. And then him in this one, spoiler, Green Goblin causes Aunt May to die. At first when they do it, I'm like, did she really just survive that bomb? I'm like, really? I'm like, not even affected at all. And then like slowly went into it. I'm like, oh fuck. And like what I talked about in non-spoiler talk, like Tom Holland's eyes and like, whew, I'm like,
yeah, it was tough.
Like that was his Uncle Ben moment, and we're gonna get into that later with the
other guys.
The other guys. But shit, and then Peter's anger finally really hits off, and he basically almost gives up, and then it's left to Ned and MJ with Doctor Strange's sling ring to try to find him, and they're in Ned's like mom's house, and then he's like, I wish we could find Peter. There's a little sparkle in the background, and Ned's holding the sling ring. I'm like, let's go. And then I like how he just knows how to do it right away. It took Steven like forever to learn how to do it, but of
course, whole montage.
Yeah. And then Ned figures it out, and you see like a dark suited Spider-Man figure in the distance through the ring, and you're like, and it's fucking Andrew Garfield. He hops through, and he looks just so happy to be there. Like, I'm so happy for him as a person, because he really enjoyed those Spider-Man films. I've rewatched a lot of clips on YouTube, and his Spider-Man was very unique, in my opinion. Like, the way he moved and fought, and actually fought like a spider. Like, I remember in one scene where he fought the lizard, he set up like a whole web, and he was feeling vibrations to see where the lizard would be. Like, little things like that. So, big appreciation for him. And they have this great scene. I'm like, oh, fuck, he's back. It's happening. My theater broke out cheering. I don't know about yours, but...
Yeah, when he jumped through... First, when Spider-Man jumped through the portal and he was in his mask, Spider-Man, they're like, whoa, then he takes off his mask, and then they really went crazy. Almost a bigger reaction than Tobey's entrance in a second here. Bigger reaction for Andrew, I think, personally, because I think Andrew's entrance was just done better. But it was, probably the loudest reaction above the Daredevil reaction. Let's pause here for a second, because I just feel like we kind of skipped over Aunt May dying, so I want to talk about that more.
oh, yeah, that's yeah. Go ahead.
So Green Goblin obviously turns bad when they're in the apartment, and he convinces basically all the villains except for Doc Ock, because he's already been fixed, to join him in being bad. So they're all leaving the apartment, breaking away, and in the midst of that is this fight between Green Goblin and Tom Holland's Peter Parker, Spider-Man, which is just like an incredible fight. He's like power bombing him through the floors, and they're going down, and I'm just like, oh my god, this fight is so good. I don't even know if I can think of like a Tobey Maguire Green Goblin fight that's as good. Now, the end of Spider-Man 1, that's an awesome fight, obviously, but like this was just like insane. And then it ends with Green Goblin coming down. J. Jonah Jameson like brings all the cops there and stuff, and then it comes down, first of all, just wrecks Aunt May with a glider, and I'm like, oh, she's dead, I thought. And then he throws the bomb, and I'm like, oh, she's dead again.
Yeah. And first, like, when she survived that, I'm like, okay. And then, like, she slowly dies.
Stands up.
Like, Peter, like, then Tom discovers, like, the blood, like, from her backside, I think. And, like, that death was done so well, like, she doesn't even know, like, what's happening. Like, she isn't aware, which I think is a great version of death. And no one's helping Tom's Peter, because he's viewed as like a villain. So they all have the sniper rifles on him, and Happy pulls up, and really sad moment there. But like, I just want to go, like, Tom is punching Willem Dafoe in the face like as hard as he can, and Willem's just like laughing at him. I'm like, holy fuck, they are doing it. Yes, I mean, shit, man. I just think back to Civil War when he catches Winter Soldier's punch. He's like, oh, you have a metal arm? That's awesome. And then, like, just to think how strong fucking...
Yeah. And
Great stuff.
And with the Aunt May death, I think this just goes to show one of the best things about the MCU is patience, right? Like, they could have done the Avengers Assemble line in Avengers, or they could have done it in Age of Ultron. They did it in Endgame. You know what I mean? Like, it's the patience, whether it's Kevin Feige or whoever. And with this movie, right, with the Uncle Ben moment, it's like we don't get the Uncle Ben moment because it's like, okay, if they did it again for a third time, it'd be lame, right? So we don't get it in Homecoming. And then in Far From Home, you're like, oh, well, it's like, is the representation of Tony dying, is that basically like an Uncle Ben moment? But, you know, not really. Then you get to this movie, his third movie, we get an Uncle Ben moment with his Aunt May, who's been there the entire time, and it just makes perfect sense. It's like they had the patience to wait to do it in this movie, where they have the other two Spider-Men there to relate to him about it. I thought it was just done extremely well.
And she drops the line, the famous line that we never thought was going to get, or if I ever thought it was going to be dropped, I thought maybe it was going to be Toby or Andrew dropping it to him. But I love that Aunt May was that version for him, and then brought that angry side of Peter that happened to the other two as well from Uncle Ben. And I love how it was Aunt May for him. The total swerve. I liked it. Liked it a lot.
So great. It was so great. And like,
it was so well done.
That was probably the most emotional I got watching the movie, was that scene, because it just took me so by surprise. Like, of course I thought she was wrecked, you know, when she got hit, and then when she just gets up, I'm like, oh, typical MCU, she's fine, right? And then she just fucking dies, and I'm like, oh my god, it got me.
Okay, and then, so I'm glad we went back to that, but back to where we were. Shortly after Andrew comes through, he's back. Like, and like the slow reveal, like, same thing, but Andrew's in suit, but Toby's not. I'm like, so I started to get worried there. Toby's not in suit. What's going to happen? And he looks great. Obviously, he looks older. And him and Andrew have this like funny moment where they both have this like standoff with each other, where they both like spin and like, and it. Sorry, rambling. Trailer number 2. We thought at the end of trailer number 2, they're starting to come through. We thought maybe that was going to be villains. I mean, the other Spider-Man coming through. But no. But we'll get to that. What that actually was at the end. It turns out everyone who knows Peter as Spider-Man comes through, including Peter himself, who obviously knows he's Spider-Man. I thought that was genius. And the fact that they came through as well with the villains at the same time. They're obviously not going to cause a ruckus because they're fucking Spider-Man. I love that. Genius.
Yeah, and that gave them that little bit of understanding of what was going on, because they had been there and then like, oh, there's a Spider-Man here. So they kind of had that understanding, especially Toby came off as like, I've been looking for Tom Holland, basically, is the way he presented it.
I saw the news. Yeah. Like, I know what's going on here. And like I said in spoiler-free area, like, the conversations and relationships, like, obviously everyone's looking forward to the 3 Spider-Man fighting together. But them just in a lab, all hanging out, just, like, making web fluid, making these cures. So, MJ or Ned, St. Peter, they're all go like, what? Like, all 3 of them pop up. This little quirks like that, them finding out Toby has, you know, natural web fluid, and like, and it had the same sound from his 3 movies. I'm like, it was so good to hear that again. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I remembered exactly how it sounded.
And quickly on that, as we're driving to the movie theater, of course, me and my wife were talking about what we want to see in the movie, our final predictions. I swear to God, I'm not lying. The one thing I said was, if they are in the movie, I just hope to God they all have a conversation about how the 2 of them have web shooters and Toby shoots out of his arm. I'm like, I need them to acknowledge that. And they did. They actually did twice. But the first time they acknowledged, I was like, we looked at each other. I'm like, oh my God, it's exactly what I, wanted to happen. It was so great the way they like talked about it. It was so spot on. You could tell it was like a fan service moment, but it was done so well the way they talked about it. And they didn't ruin it, right? Like, they didn't say something stupid, it's like they kind of still didn't really reveal what exactly happens, I loved that moment.
Yeah, really quick, back to fan service. Made me laugh so hard in the theater. But when they were talking about science, and then Willem Dafoe, his famous meme, I'm something of a scientist myself. I'm like, yes!
That got an applause in my theater. Yeah.
That's so dumb. I'm glad that's the one meme they kept of him. Oh, so great. But seeing these 3, like, I was almost frozen. I'm like, it's happening. It's happening. This is unbelievable. We've gotten little clues with Jonah Jameson being the same character in this universe, but like them being it, I'm still reeling from it.
And real quick, I also love that since Ned and MJ bring them in, right? The first moment we see of them, the three of them getting together, it's Tom Holland's Peter sulking over Aunt May. He's at his lowest. So when these other two Spider-Man come in, he's ready to like give up, basically. Like he's at his lowest, and they come in to lift him back up. You know, it's not like he's in the middle of battle and then they bust in. You know, it's like it was a very emotional, grounded moment, and I thought that was the perfect way to do it.
Besides Tony, this is his first real grief. Like, this is his first loss, besides Tony. And, like, Tony's been done to death. So, unfortunately, done to death, pun intended. I feel like Aunt May needed to die. I didn't guess it would happen, but after it happened, I'm like, okay, that needed to happen. And, like, and the fact that Tom's growth comes from the other two having their emotional destruction already to help him grow was incredible. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm like, this is so cool. Like, he has no mentors left besides other versions of himself. Like, and like, he's like almost at that peak Spider-Man, and like the two people that help him through are other Spider-Man. I mean, it's...
Yeah, and the fact that when he come up, he's like, obviously Tony died, right? But he died defeating Thanos, right? It wasn't like because of Peter. So it's like Aunt May died because of Peter. Like, it's pretty hard to deny that, right? And then they come in, and they're like, yeah, Gwen, like, I lost Gwen Stacy, who died because of me. And then Tobey Maguire's like, I lost Uncle Ben because of me. And they could just... Literally, it's himself, so it makes sense, but no one else could relate to him, really. You know what I mean? Like, they died because I'm Spider-Man. It was such a great moment there. I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything in that scene because it was so much and it was really great. But
after that comes the science stuff where they're setting everything up, and like I think we already went into a little detail about that, about the web shooters and the cures, and they like. No, they don't have to die. We can cure them. It's like, we're going to cure that ass, which,
yeah.
That made me laugh. But we shortly get to... We thought it was a Captain America memorial, but really it's just a Statue of Liberty with... They're putting up a Captain America shield, basically. So sort of a memorial. But I like how they're all suited up. They're all ready for their first fight, and they suck fighting together. Yeah. I thought that was great. And they have those... And they still have their quirky moments where, like, Toby's like, no, man, it's okay. You're talking to Andrew. You know what? You're amazing, man. You're amazing. I'm like, okay.
Dude, can we talk about that scene? Yes. So, first, for the science scene, there was a lot of cool little quips in there. That's when they brought up the web shooter thing. There's a lot of cool little moments in there. I love the little nod to Harry Osborn when he's like, Ned's like, did you have a best friend? He's like, yeah, he died in my arms after he tried to kill me. That was so great. And at that moment, I'm like, okay, there were some rumors he might become Hobgoblin. I'm like, Ned's not becoming Hobgoblin in this movie. Maybe later on, who knows, but not in this movie. And that was great.
The entire time, just like he expects it to happen. Okay, so, like, it's just gonna happen right there. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. And then that scene where they're now getting ready to fight. And first of all, Andrew makes that funny line like to Toby. He's like, "Are you gonna be dressed up as a cool pastor or something?" Because he's just wearing civilian clothes the whole time. Seeing the Tobey Maguire suit, mind blowing. Once he was wearing it, looked great.
Yeah, I'm like. When he didn't come through wearing the suit, I'm like, oh no, what's gonna like? I started to get worried. I'm like, is he just gonna be the mentor, like on the side? And then as soon as he did the, it's always on, buddy. I'm like, they're doing it.
And then when they get to that scene where he's telling him, "You are amazing," it's good on so many levels because it's like. Everyone shits on in those movies, right? The Amazing Spider-Man movies. And so I feel like part of it was in there to be like, hey, like, it's not his fault, right? Like, it's not Andrew Garfield's fault. So it's like, you're great. I felt like it was like a very meta conversation.
Yeah, because he was good. Like, it's not his fault. And like, they started talking about their villains. Like, oh yeah, like, I fought this alien organism. Like, oh, I fought a guy in a rhino metal suit. Like,
yeah. And gotta give credit to Sony basically almost every dumb thing they did in the previous 5 movies before the MCU, they either did something to correct it in this, or they just referenced how stupid it was. Like, they weren't afraid. Like, they referenced Jamie Foxx falling into the electric eel thing like 3 times because it's so ridiculous. When Andrew's like, he fell into a vat of electric eels, and Toby's like, yep, that'll do it. It was so great. But with that scene in particular with Andrew Garfield, he's like, you are amazing. You know, the movies are also called The Amazing Spider-Man, so it just works on so many levels.
Exactly. That's why I thought it was so hilarious. I'm like, that's fucking
incredible. To agree with you, I rewatched those films as well leading into this, and the script, right? The script, terrible. Like, especially the second one where the story goes, terrible. Studio interference, whatever. But, like, the action in those movies is really good. The fight scenes are really good. And Andrew, he's quippy. Like, a lot of people don't give him credit. He's really good. He's probably still my 3rd favorite just based on, you know, the movies. But it's like, I was like, wow, I was at some points impressed going back to watch those movies when it came to the actual Spider-Man stuff. So I'm glad they kind of put him on a pedestal a little bit in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So after all that, you know, quippy moments, you know, like, we get into the fight, and it's hard to remember who's there when. Doc Ock's out of the picture at this point, but all the rest are still there, and they team up and they have that famous, you know, like, they're fighting together, but they suck because they fought with others, but they haven't fought with each other. And Tom's like, you know, I fought with the Avengers, and like Toby's like, oh, that's awesome. Who are the Avengers? And like, you don't have the Avengers? It's like, and Andrew's like, no, we don't.
Yeah, that was great.
The dialogue, the dialogue between these three, like, the entire time I was saying, like, what's the dialogue for this movie going to be? And like, after watching it, like, the dialogue was one of the best parts, I feel like.
Yeah, the film is mostly dialogue. When you think about it, I mean, there's the highway scene with Doc Ock, right? And then there's, like, you know, the Electro fight scene, just a few little fight scenes. And then there's the big scene at the end, which takes a very long time. But, like, the whole movie before that, it's like, mostly dialogue between characters. And that could have been very bad, but it turned out very, you know, done very well, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite parts, you know. There's people in my theater, you know, like, soon as, like, the action stopped, you know.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and someone's phone kept going off. It was ridiculous.
Oh, no.
I mean, not that often, but still, it's like, come on. But in a movie of this magnitude, where even the dialogue is great and keeps you intrigued, I'm like, good job.
Yeah.
Good job, movie.
But then we get to the fight.
Yeah. They come up with the plan. We're going to take out one at a time, cure them. You know, that's fine, whatever. But then Peter's rage, we kind of forget about. Tom Holland's Peter. Oh, also really funny. They call himself Peter 1, Peter 2, Peter 3, which is super funny because they're like, they don't know who they're talking to because they all have the same name. But we have that famous scene where MJ and Ned open the portal, and then, you know, Lizard realizes, and then they fight, blah, blah, blah. MJ and Ned are now on the Statue of Liberty. MJ falls, and they're like, oh, shit. Scene from the trailer. Tom's about to grab her, but then the glider comes in out of nowhere. It's like, oh, shit, because I don't think we've seen him for most of this during this final fight. And then Andrew, I wish they stretched it out a little bit longer, but Andrew gets his redemption, and I almost cried when he catches MJ, and he's like...
Yeah, he's crying.
Yeah, he's crying. He's like, because he's reminded of his moment with Gwen. That scene got me, but I just wish it was a little bit longer before he caught her. It felt a little quick, but... It's fine. I got the gist at the end of it.
And then Ned goes to fall and he gets saved by the cape, which is something no one guessed, right? Like, everyone's like, oh, Toby will get him or something. No, it's this Doctor Strange's cape. That was pretty great.
I wouldn't even guess he was going to fall. But who welcomes... because Doc Ock has been stuck in the mirror dimension, and then all of a sudden...
Doctor Strange.
Yeah, Doctor Strange is stuck in the mirror dimension. Who lets him back through?
I think Ned goes to open up because they have to run out of the portal they were in because the lizard came in, and then MJ's like, open another one, and then he opens another one, and Doctor Strange walks out, and then he's like, oh, you can do magic, cool. Like, he like kind of acknowledges it, but not really.
Yeah, I was hoping to say something like, already? Like, what do you mean you opened a portal? You know how long it took? Whatever. But this all leads to another final fight with Tom and Green Goblin, and Tom drops a line where it's like, oh, something about I want to kill you. I'm like,
he's like, are you gonna send me back to die? And he's like, no, I'm gonna kill you myself, something to that effect.
And I was like, holy fuck. And then Toby and Andrew are like watching from afar. Like they both like swing in and like, oh shit, what's happening? And like Tom is just laying in these fucking punches, man. I'm like, oh my God. And then this is my favorite scene in the movie, by the way. And then he grabs the glider. I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. And then who steps in to stop him? Fucking Toby. No words, no head movement. Just looks him straight in the eyes. And like, just that subtle acting. He's like, you know this isn't right, Pete. Like, and then I got really scared for what happened right afterwards because he gets stabbed. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
But that was my favorite scene in the movie, in my opinion, hands down. Like that character moment of Peter who's gone through that angry revenge, teaching the younger one. Like, fuck, man, that scene broke me, dude.
Yeah. And the fact that, and what I mentioned earlier when I was saying like, oh, they would go back and correct stuff, like I felt that's what they were doing with like the curing of the villains, because it used to be such a normal thing in superhero movies to like, let's just kill every villain in the first movie they're in, right? And they usually wouldn't have Spider-Man kill them, like they would die by their own hand somehow, or sacrifice himself. But they fixed a lot of stuff with the villains where they would just cure them, and it made sense because it's like, oh, Andrew did cure the Lizard, Tony Stark would have the technology to cure Sandman and Electro, so like it made sense. And Doc Ock like literally just had a fried microchip, like no one could fix that. So it was like, it made sense. But with Green Goblin,
it was 2004, man.
Yeah.
Microchips were just invented.
With Green Goblin, it was so great that not only did they cure him, but they literally almost reenact the glider death scene, but this time with Tom Holland going to kill him with the glider, and it's Toby who in his movie, he doesn't necessarily let Green Goblin, like he doesn't do it on purpose per se and have him kill himself, but that's what happens. And now he's not only saving Tom from doing it, but also in a way saving Green Goblin, which he wasn't able to do in his movie. It worked perfectly, but then Green Goblin just stabs him.
I got so scared. I'm like, no. But also Spider-Man 3, when Venom goes to stab Peter and then Harry saves him. Mm-hmm. But this time, like, Peter saves Toby saves Tom, but in a different way. Like, don't go down this path. It's this because Harry went through that whole vengeance path because you killed my father and it wasn't good. It's like, this isn't it, pal. This isn't it. Like,
yeah. And I did think he was gonna die when he got stabbed by Green Goblin. I was gonna, that would have been, interesting choice, but I would have been like, it would actually be a little bit of poetic justice that Green Goblin comes back and then kills Tobey Maguire's Peter. But he's just like basically fine somehow. Like he's just like, I've been stabbed before.
it's like, it hurts. I'm okay. Which
yeah,
I'm glad he lived. I want that character to be happy. And they kind of like, in their little quippy dialogue when they first got introduced, it kind of introduced that him and MJ are kind of like still working it out, which is nice.
Yeah, that's what I thought too, because I was like, they basically confirmed he's still with MJ, so if he dies, it's like, imagine MJ like, your husband disappeared to another universe and then got killed.
What if MJ came through the portal?
Yeah, that was one thing me and Haley discussed on our way home too. We're like, obviously Emma Stone's, what's her name in the movie? Gwen is dead, right? And they bring Andrew in after she's already dead, so that one really made sense. But I was surprised Kirsten Dunst wasn't in the movie. I mean, there's already so much in there. What are you going to do with her? But it would have been cool to see it.
Yeah, Strange said it, like, after the spell. It's like we stopped it before, any more could come through. Mm-hmm. So, like, only a select few got through. Mm-hmm. And that kind of leads into the end. Doctor Strange is free, and then we see, similar to Loki, we see, like, the purple breaks, and Doctor Strange is trying to, fix them all. And I only caught one. And I'm like, who? Because you start to see some bodies. Mm-hmm. And I saw the shape of, like, the original Rhino. Not Amazing Spider-Man. Like, I saw, like, the exact head shape and body shape of, like, the comic video game accurate Rhino. I'm like, oh, shit. But I didn't. Did you catch anyone in that?
No, I definitely saw, like, morphing bodies that are coming through. I wasn't trained. I didn't, like... I wasn't looking for it, so I didn't see anything.
Yeah, I mean, in the trailer, we thought that was Toby and Andrew coming through, but no. But basically, and Peter, I'm surprised he did this, but Peter has this moment where it's like, to undo the whole spell, everyone forgets who I am. I'm like, and I thought this was going to be like Tom Holland's like curtain call as Spider-Man. Like, oh shit, they're doing this. And as this spell happens, all the other villains go back to where they came from. And we have this emotional scene where Peter says goodbye to Ned and MJ, which was very emotional. And Strange cast it, and it works. And
yeah,
multiverse is shut down. No one remembers who Peter is, and it was. I'll get into it why I like it at the end, but like that coffee shop scene.
After everyone forgets, yeah.
After everyone forgets, yeah. So people know who Spider-Man is, but no one knows who Peter Parker is. Is basically it trumps the first spell.
And that's why it worked for me too, because when he first said it to him, I didn't understand, and I was like, oh, they're just gonna do what they're originally gonna do, and it's gonna work. Like I felt a little bit like that's kind of dumb, but once I realized, no, originally it was gonna be we're gonna make people forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, so everyone will still be fine. They just won't know that. But now we have to do the extra step. Not only do you have to give that up, now no one will even remember you as a human. And that's what made it work for me, is that they went that extra step. Like, you messed up the first time. Now to pay for that, you have to basically not exist, which we'll talk more about in a minute. But that's why it worked for me.
Yeah. Before that, Toby and Andrew, have their little, fun, like, kind of goodbye. Oh, and Tom gives them, like, all a big hug, and, like no one cheered, but me by myself, I'm like, yeah. Like, he says, I love you guys. I'm like, I love that. All the villains are cured. They all go back. Everyone forgets. And then Peter goes to the gravesite of Aunt May. I thought we were going to see an Uncle Ben headstone, but it's not about Uncle Ben, whatever. I mean, not Peter. Toby and Andrew mentioned their Uncle Ben, but it's not important to this scene. And then Happy's there, and it's like, Happy doesn't know Peter. I'm like, oh my God, this is so weird. But, like, Happy knows, like, in terms of the canon, it's like, what do they think happened in their minds?
Yeah.
In Far From Home, in Homecoming, you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, that and I don't want to say it's necessarily a negative, because it's more so like it doesn't really matter to this movie, right? But when you're talking about the MCU, because we were talking about it on the way home, and it's like, okay, so Happy knows Spider-Man, right? But he doesn't know who it is. So it's like, did Tony know who Spider-Man? I mean, Tony's dead, so I guess like it doesn't matter. But then it's like, why doesn't he have a suit at the end then? It was just like a lot of it felt very like, well, it's the end of the movie, so let's not worry about it. You know what I mean? But it's like, okay, someone's gonna have to worry about it, like eventually.
It felt like it happened, but no one remembers. But they didn't erase it. It still happened. It's just that no one remembers.
When he was there with Happy, he was like, "Oh, I know him through Spider-Man," and Happy's like, "Me too." This would make no sense for Peter to do, so it makes sense that he didn't. But in my own head, I'm like, I wish he was just like, "Oh yeah, who is Spider-Man?" Like, just push the topic, because it's like it doesn't make any sense. But it's like, whatever, I'll accept it.
Maybe every scene happened, but in their minds, he was masked the entire time.
Yeah.
But how would Happy know Aunt May? It's.
How would he know that Tony recruited somebody? Like,
it's like, I don't know. All that happened, but they just don't remember who it was for whatever reason.
And also, what about like his birth certificate, his social security number, like
his ID?
And if that stuff still exists, then like, what about him being at his school? Like, how far do we go?
Well, I'm glad he brought that up, because I'll get to why I like it. But he gets like a 1-bedroom apartment, like a studio, and he unpacks books, and one of them says like how to pass your GED, which is like no record of high school, no record of anything. Anyone can take that. I'm like, okay, he literally has nothing. Like, no one remembers him. And what I really like about this and his movies compared to all the rest, his story was told in reverse, and it begins and it ends how it should begin. In the beginning, he's thrown in right with all the Avengers, fighting with all of them, like as if that's what should be at the end. But at the end, he ends up where he should be beginning. Knows no one, has no friends, no one knows him. Lives in a 1-bedroom apartment, and he has like a homemade suit. And I thought that was like a weird, cool, poetic ending, if it is the end, to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, where he ended where it should begin, and he began where he should end. And I thought that little storytelling beat was very well done, in my opinion.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That is actually a really good point. For me, I don't want to get too controversial, but I'm going to bring up Star Wars. So for me,
it's always controversial when you bring up Star Wars.
One of my biggest problems with the sequel trilogy, and I'm a lot more forgiving than a lot of people, my biggest problem is that by the end of Rise of Skywalker, it basically felt like an origin story for Rey, a character who we will never see again, at least played by played by Daisy Ridley. And so it was kind of like you leave that movie going, oh, that would probably be a really cool character. The end. You know, like she wasn't a cool character the whole time. Maybe now she'll be because of the way they set it up, right? That's when I'm gonna leave that. You can comment if you want. But with this now, it feels kind of similar in the sense that, like, wow, if this Spider-Man now has a next movie, it's like he's set up to be the best Spider-Man ever. Like no one could ever, you know, people always made fun of him, Iron Boy Jr., right? Like all this stuff they always talked about him. It's like through the events of this movie, it puts the whole trilogy in a context where the next Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland, like he is Spider-Man, like he is the quintessential Spider-Man. I think that will happen. I think it will exist. So it makes it better because it's like, okay, knowing that I think those movies will exist, it makes sense now that he's been set up for that. It's not set up into the end. It's set up into his next movies. But even if they didn't happen, for whatever reason, stuff falls through, it doesn't happen, in your mind, you know, oh, this Spider-Man would go on to be the best Spider-Man ever. You know what I mean? So in a way, it's a good ending, even though you can imagine that character going on to exist.
It was a very poetic ending, but also an opportunity for a brand new beginning, like starting all over.
And that suit at the end?
Yeah, it looked awesome. Like that blue, it felt a little bit Raimi, a little bit, and like
dude, it's like the original Spider-Man suit you see as a child.
Like in a comic book. Yeah, it looked so good. And like I think you and I have talked off camera before about what does Spider-Man do in the winter? And at the end, he's swinging through New York in the winter. I'm like, who keeps answering all my questions? It's incredible.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. But so end of the movie. Dude, should we get into the post-credit stuff, or do you have more to say?
I'll have a little bit more to say, and then we'll get into. I know we've been going about an hour here, but a little bit more. I just want to say, I really loved the way that the movie literally recontextualizes his entire story, and really my biggest fear going into it was there's going to be too many characters, there's going to be too many villains. They've literally done this in 2 Spider-Man movies before where there's too many villains, right? In Spider-Man 3, Amazing Spider-Man 2. If Tobey and Andrew are in it, they're not going to have enough time. They're either going to be just cameos that are going to make us wish we had more, or it's just, you know, going to take away from Tom Holland. Literally none of those things were true. Like, they just pulled off all of it, and I don't know how. So congratulations. You did all of it.
Luckily, we had the 5 previous movies to help us establish a little bit.
Yeah, true.
A little bit, so that helped. And us already knowing Tobey and Tom helped. So it was just a perfect storm, in my opinion. It shouldn't have worked, but it did.
And the fact that this movie now exists. I'm trying to think of a way to say this that doesn't sound weird, but like this movie will now forever exist, right? So like it's eventually going to come out one day on DVD, whatever. We will now always be able to watch a movie where all 3 live-action Spider-Man fight basically almost all of the villains from all the Spider-Man movies. It makes from Spider-Man 1 up to this movie one essential like set, as to where it used to always be separated, right? Like they did not connect in any way, maybe Easter eggs, whatever, but now it's like you can watch the entire Spider-Man story from Tobey Maguire's beginning to what right now is the end of Tom Holland, and that just like blows my mind.
Before this, it was just cameos or just like, oh, J. Jonah Jameson, Kingpin, even in the same movie, Daredevil. I'm like, oh, cool, but now it's like, whoa, like this is huge, and I'm gonna get in the Blu-ray and I'm gonna watch it again and again, and it's gonna be one of those things where it's like this didn't happen, and like I was sitting in the theater like trying to like sit with myself. I'm like, this is big, dude. Like savor this. Like you have to remember seeing this. It's like this is something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know it's hard to talk about negatives because we just watched the movie and we love it and we're like gushing about it for an hour, right? But as far as negatives, not all of the villains were I'm trying to think of how to phrase it. I think they were all like, none of them were a mistake that they were in the movie or anything, but some of them were definitely done better than others. I think you can like pretty obviously tell that, right? So like for Sandman, he just has his same gimmick from Spider-Man 3, except he's worse because in Spider-Man 3 you had the actual actor and you know, in the actual storyline that he had an actual ending. So to just bring him back in this to then have the same story, it just wasn't as good. Also with the Lizard, he's just the Lizard. Like, he's just in the movie to be a villain. Not a huge complaint because we have, I think, Electro and Doc Ock were really good, and then Green Goblin was just amazing. So not going to complain a lot, but, you know, I don't want to ignore it either.
Yeah, since we're talking about negatives, let's go back to positives. Seeing Andrew interact with Max, their little quip together, it's like, oh, kid from Queens, poor, I thought you were black.
Oh, that was pretty funny, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, maybe there is a black Spider-Man. And I went,
Yeah.
Miles Morales. And then, you know, have Doc Ock have his, you know, fun, meet cute moment with Toby, like, oh, you're all grown up. I'm like, oh, you got, because their relationship in Spider-Man 2 before it went to shit was pretty good. But yeah, with Sandman, he's like, oh, I want to get back to my daughter. But if you want to get back to your daughter, why didn't you like elect to just hit the box? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, what was his goal? I don't know. Did he think his daughter existed in this universe and he was going to go see her? I don't know.
And then it's tough not having the original actor. And then like Electro, he's like, I liked how he's like, I don't like how this feels with like the power thing, and his slow like, you know, I don't like this, man. You know, and then Jamie Foxx was so good in this. I'm glad they let him.
He's great.
I'm glad they let him like basically be Jamie Foxx and not like basically what Max was in Amazing Spider-Man 2. They did him a lot better in this.
But back to the negatives real quick.
It's tough. It's tough.
I know it's tough. But I did just want to say, I mean, we already kind of talked about it, but really, the beginning of this movie is awesome. The first act basically is awesome. The last act is awesome. The middle of the movie, it's not bad. It's just not as good. You know, it's just kind of there. It's just like, let's round up these villains and move the plot forward. And while it's cool seeing some of the villain stuff, it just doesn't stack up to the rest of the movie. So on rewatches, that'll probably drag a little bit for me.
That'll be my skips. Like it reminded me a lot of second act of Endgame, where it's like post 5 years and like everything just felt super weird. It's like the scene with like Hulk and Rocket going to see Thor, and then like Paul Rudd's just hanging out eating tacos. I'm like,
yeah,
this is like not necessarily bad, but it's like, this is so weird. Like, what's happening? Because obviously Acts 1 and Acts 3 in Endgame are like, oh, and I feel like it's the same way for this one, where it's like that middle part is like, okay, let's slow down a little bit here before we get crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be go the whole time unless you're, you know, Infinity War. But yeah, that's all I'll really say about it. I'm not going to try to dig into find more negatives because that's really all I have to say about it. But so, unless you have anything else, I'm cool with moving on to the credit stuff.
Yeah, I'm cool. Yeah, but based off of what we talked, what do you recommend? What do you recommend?
Absolutely not.
Don't go see this. But okay, let's jump to mid credit. Venom, Tom Hardy. It was whatever, and so we find out that he was basically brought through the spell with Doctor Strange because of Venom's hive mind, because like all the Venoms throughout all the multiverses are connected. So that's why, because he knew who Peter Parker was, I think, or that Peter Parker's Spider-Man. Not necessarily that Peter Parker, obviously, through the other villains. And then he flashes back to his own universe. I'm like, oh, okay. I thought it'd be fun to see Tom Hardy and Tom Holland interact.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's going to happen because that happened. But a little bit of Venom so it'll be Venom the character, the voice, but not Tom Hardy. So I don't know.
Very weird.
Yeah, I don't know what to think there. That's a lot.
And they haven't exactly shied away in the past from teasing Tom Hardy and Tom Holland like eventually meeting and fighting. So it's very weird to me that they would all of a sudden introduce this as, oh, well, he's still going to be in the Venomverse, which no one really likes, to be honest. And then we have this goo here that's going to, you know, infect Topher Grace or something. You know, I don't know. Like, if I was Tom Hardy, first of all, I'd be like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah. Are they going to find another Eddie Brock? And it's like, that Venom's going to be like, oh, Eddie, it's me. And then he's going to be like, who the fuck are you? Like, is that...
I don't know.
But, like, Carnage was like a child of Venom. So is that little goo piece a child of Venom? So it's not even Venom? I don't know.
I think it just would have been better if, like, they're just in New York or wherever, and they just have some type of casual encounter where Peter doesn't know, obviously, that that's Venom, but by the end of the scene, you know, Venom knows it's him, and they just have a small interaction. I would have much rather seen them two on screen together than to just be like, oh, here's Tom Hardy for 30 seconds, and now he's gone, and some goose here. I didn't really like it.
Yeah, kind of a turnoff, because seeing these two actors interact together would be amazing, in my opinion. But whatever, I'm sure they'll find a way.
We'll see.
Because after this, I'm thinking about the Morbius. I'm like, okay, how does this connect? Like, what about Michael Keaton? Like, what's
Sony?
I thought I would come out of this more clear about what happens in that movie, but now I'm less clear.
Yeah.
Like, but whatever.
And I saw the trailer before, and it was just seeing Sam Raimi's Spider-Man on the wall behind him, saying murder on it, then seeing Michael Keaton, and then he makes a joke about Venom. I'm just not going to see it, man. I'm not going to see the movie. I'm sorry.
Oh, my God. Okay. But, moving on, I famously do not like post credit scenes for Marvel. I mean, they're always something that you don't necessarily need to see, in my opinion. Aunt playing the drums or daughter taking over the business, that was already obvious. But this one, like, throwing back to the end of Captain America First Avenger, we get a fucking trailer for Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck, they're stealing a video from us. I'm like, I totally did not expect that. Like, holy shit. And this trailer, man, I mean, it looks neat. I mean, we brought back the one dude from the first Doctor Strange. Can't remember. Mordo, I think his name is. He's back. He's got a full head of dreadlocks. And we got Wong, and then Wanda has, like, this whole, like, vineyard thing going on. Mm-hmm. And, like, woo! And,
yeah. And I like how when Doctor Strange gets there, he's like, oh, I'm not here to talk about Westview. And I'm like, and that's the last time it'll ever be mentioned again.
But I like how he knew. So, like, he's keeping his eye, he says, like, oh, I keep an eye on all blah, blah, blah figures that are a threat. So he knew, but, like, he didn't feel the need to interfere. Which is fine. He didn't need to, obviously. But trailer's fine. See a lot of cool visual effects. Wong and everybody's back in there. But then at the end of the trailer, if you've seen all of What If, it's like, oh shit. Evil Doctor Strange. Nice.
Yeah.
I think that's the first time. I don't think Toby, Andrew, and Peter. I mean, keep calling Tom Peter. Tom, Toby, and Andrew. I don't think those count. But this is like the first time we see like a character interacting with themselves that are themselves. Mm-hmm. Besides Vision and White Vision, but but in terms of multiverse factors, like that is going to be super interesting. And based off the trailer, I still don't know, what's going to happen in terms of shit. It left it very open, like just like, hey, look at this, look at that, look at this, but nothing where it's like, this is going to happen at the beginning, this is going to happen in the middle. It was just like a very good teaser.
Yeah, it'll be cool to see Doctor Strange fight himself. I thought it's a little bit weird how we literally have this movie, Multiverse of Madness, right? But at the end of Spider-Man, Peter makes this big sacrifice to fix the multiverse to close the multiverse back up. He makes that big sacrifice. And now we're going to go into Doctor Strange, and it's just going to be like, oh, well, actually, it's not fixed. Like, I don't know. I'm sure it'll explain it better in the movie. I'm just saying, for my first impression, a little bit odd to literally see an ending of a movie where they fixed it, and now you're getting shown a trailer where, oh, it's not fixed. It's kind of weird. But we'll see what happens.
The multiverse was fixed from our mistake, from what we did.
Me and you.
Yeah. if I'm Peter or Steven, but what if someone on the other end opened it?
That's fair.
In another
Evil
universe,
Doctor Strange.
Yeah, he opened it, and like he caused all this, and we have to deal with it. So it's not our mistake. It's what's her name? Sylvie's mistake, because it's her fault.
Yeah.
Which I hope that we get some mention of her in that movie, because she caused it.
Yeah, and I mean the fact that Kang was in that show, it makes you think, they will have to acknowledge that happened, but I don't know, they really, at least so far, they really aren't like fully committing to bringing up the Disney Plus shows in the movies. Maybe that'll change with Doctor Strange. It hasn't really happened yet. But then again, the movies we've gotten were Black Widow, a prequel, Shang-Chi, which is almost completely disconnected, and then Eternals, which was almost completely disconnected, and now this movie, which was made by Sony. So I guess it makes sense they wouldn't mention them that much. So we'll see if they start to connect them a little bit more as they move forward with the shows, because Loki supposedly broke the multiverse not just for his Disney Plus series, but for the whole MCU. So we'll see. But yeah, both of them, I don't want to say I'm disappointed with the Doctor Strange trailer. It was cool to see. Neither of them were like, oh my god, this is the best post credits of all time or anything for me. They were fine, but man, what a movie.
Yeah, in terms of post credit scenes, it's the best post credit scene I've seen since a long time. Mm-hmm. And then the first post credit scene, whatever. But this movie is, yeah, man. I mean, I don't think I'll see it again in theaters this weekend, but I don't know. Maybe I will. I don't know. Just to see how seeing how other people react. Like, who knows? Maybe if I have time, why not? I mean, it's a once in a long time type movie, but overall, I highly recommend.
All right. Well, if you've watched this whole thing, thank you so much. Subscribe if you haven't. We not only review movies, but we react to movie trailers. We watched shows such as Hawkeye, Book of Boba Fett that will be coming out. We're also watching Star Wars: The Clone Wars, so subscribe if you haven't, so you don't miss any of our videos.
And that'll be it. Thanks for coming along on this ride. It's been fun. I can't believe this movie's out. I've been waiting so long for this. But anyway, I'm Alex. This is Josh. We are the target audience. Listen, content is made for absolutely everybody, but we think it's specifically made for us, and hopefully for you too. Thanks for coming along on this ride, and we'll see you on the next one.